Mercedes is not in serious trouble because Russell won Austria. Mercedes is in serious trouble because the car may have won in a way the FIA could not ignore. Too calm under braking, too clean on traction, too gentle on the tires, too stable through the stint, too repeatable when Red Bull expected the pace to collapse. And in Formula One, when a car gains without paying the usual price, the entire paddock starts asking the same terrifying question. Was this legal brilliance? Or did Mercedes push the trick too far? Because one fast lap can be luck. One perfect setup can be explained. But when the data shows a car behaving too efficiently in too many places at once, that is not just performance. That is a warning. And if the FIA truly found an illegal trick inside Russell's Austrian car, Mercedes could face a scandal that damages more than one win. But if the car survives the checks, the truth may be even worse for Red Bull, because then Russell's pace was not cheating. It was real, repeatable, and possibly the first sign that Mercedes has found a hidden advantage no one else knows how to stop. Subscribe to the channel. At first, Mercedes had the perfect defense. Russell won because the car finally worked. The setup landed. The tires stayed alive. The balance looked sharper. The strategy held together. And the driver delivered when it mattered. That is the explanation Mercedes will want everyone to hear, because it sounds clean, simple, and believable. A top team found performance. A top driver used it. A Grand Prix was won. But Formula One is never that simple when the data starts looking unusual. Because Red Bull would not be alarmed by a normal Mercedes victory. Verstappen would not react strongly just because Russell had one excellent afternoon. The panic begins when the car does not only look fast, it looks too efficient. That is the word that changes everything. Efficient. A fast car can still be wasteful. It can burn through tires. It can slide on corner exit. It can overheat the rears. It can force the driver to fight the steering wheel. It can produce a few brilliant laps, then slowly fall away. But an efficient car is different. It gives speed without obvious damage. It gives traction without destroying the tires. It gives stability without looking slow on the straights. It gives the driver confidence without forcing him to overdrive. And if Russell's Mercedes looked like that in Austria, Red Bull had every reason to look closer. Because in Formula One, every gain is supposed to have a price. More downforce usually brings more drag. More straight line speed usually costs grip. More aggressive traction usually increases tire stress. More tack usually creates more heat. That is the natural balance of the sport. You take something and the car makes you pay somewhere else. So when the data suggests a car is gaining in multiple areas without paying the expected cost, the paddock does not stay relaxed. It starts asking questions. How is Russell able to brake so cleanly? How is a Mercedes so stable on corner entry? How did the rear stay calm when the tires should have been under pressure? How did the car keep producing traction without sliding itself into degradation? How did the pace remain strong through the stint? And most importantly, why did the usual weakness not appear? That is the question that turns a victory into a controversy. Because the public sees the final result. The teams see the behavior behind the result. They see the throttle trace. They see the brake trace. They see the tire curve. They see the energy deployment. They see the speed profile. They see how the car moves, where it gains, where it loses, and whether the pattern makes sense. And when the pattern does not make sense, suspicion begins. Not proof, suspicion. The most dangerous space in Formula One. Because suspicion is where genius and legality begin to look almost the same. A clever legal innovation can make a rival look guilty. An illegal trick can make a car look brilliant. And until the FIA decides where the line sits, everyone is left staring at the same data and seeing different stories. Mercedes sees progress. Red Bull sees danger. The FIA sees a regulation question. Verstappen sees a rival that may have found something he cannot ignore. That is why this first block matters. Because the claim of an illegal trick is explosive, but the real tension is deeper. The real tension is whether Mercedes found performance by crossing the line or by standing right on the edge of it. And that edge is where Formula One is won. No top team wants to be comfortably legal. Comfortably legal is usually slow. Top teams want to be barely legal, close enough to the limit to gain performance, safe enough to survive inspection. And if Mercedes placed Russell's car in that zone in Austria, the controversy was almost inevitable, because the closer a team gets to the line, the more every rival wants the FIA to look. That is what Red Bull would demand. Not because they cannot accept being beaten, but because they cannot accept being beaten by something they do not understand. A rival advantage that is understood can be attacked. A rival advantage that is unclear becomes a threat to the entire season. If the Mercedes advantage was tire life, Red Bull could study degradation. If it was energy deployment, Red Bull could study hybrid usage. If it was aerodynamic balance, Red Bull could study the platform. If it was suspension behavior, Red Bull could study stability and ride height. But if the advantage came from a hidden trick or from several connected areas working together, the problem becomes much harder, because then Red Bull is not chasing one number. They are chasing a chain, and chains are what win races. A calmer rear gives Russell confidence under braking. Cleaner braking protects the front tires. A more stable platform lets the car rotate without sliding. Cleaner rotation allows earlier throttle. Earlier throttle improves exit speed. Better exits strengthen the straights. Less sliding keeps the rear tires cooler. Cooler tires preserve performance later in the stint, and preserved performance gives Mercedes strategy control. That is not one advantage. That is a system. And if a system is legal, it becomes a weapon. If a system is illegal, it becomes a scandal. That is why Mercedes could be in serious trouble. Because once the FIA is connected to story, the victory is no longer judged only by the stopwatch. It is judged by compliance, by interpretation, by what the regulations allow, by whether the performance came from cleverness or from something the rules were supposed to prevent. And that changes the emotional weight of everything. Russell's win stops being just a celebration. It becomes evidence. Every smooth exit becomes a clue. Every clean stint becomes a question. Every stable braking zone becomes part of the case. Every tire number becomes something rivals want explained. That is how quickly a Formula One result can transform. One moment, Mercedes is celebrating a statement win. The next, every detail of the car is being discussed like it could decide the future of the championship. And for Russell, that creates an uncomfortable situation, because the driver may have done everything perfectly. He may have controlled the race. He may have managed the tires. He may have hit every target the team gave him. But when a car becomes controversial, the driver gets pulled into the storm. People stop asking only how well he drove. They start asking what the car gave him. That is the brutal reality of Formula One. The driver is the face of the result. The car is the source of the suspicion. And once suspicion attaches to the car, the victory feels different. Mercedes would fight that hard. They would insist the performance came from setup, execution, balance, and development. They would defend the legality of the car. They would argue that clever engineering should not be punished just because rivals are uncomfortable. And they would be right to defend themselves if the car fits the rules, because Formula One is supposed to reward innovation. But Red Bull would see it from the opposite side. They would say the data looked too unusual to ignore. They would say the FIA has a duty to protect the line. They would say every team must know where legal innovation ends and illegal assistance begins. And they would also be right to ask, because the margins are too small to leave doubt sitting in the middle of a championship. That is why the first stage of the story is not only technical, it is political. Mercedes protecting its win, Red Bull protecting the competitive line, the FIA protecting the rulebook, Verstappen protecting the championship fight from an advantage he does not yet trust. And once those forces collide, the paddock becomes tense. Every sentence matters. Every inspection matters. Every follow-up race matters. Because the story can move in two completely different directions. If the FIA confirms an illegal trick, Mercedes faces immediate trouble. The win becomes controversial. The team's explanation is questioned. Rivals demand consequences. The entire paddock asks whether the advantage changed the result. And every future Mercedes performance is watched with suspicion. That is a scandal path. But there is another path. The FIA finds no proven breach. The car survives the checks. The data remains unusual, and Mercedes keeps the performance. That path may be even more painful for Red Bull, because then the trick was not illegal. It was understanding. And understanding is harder to defeat then a banned part disappears. A legal understanding grows. It becomes an upgrade direction. It becomes confidence. It becomes better setup choices. It becomes a car that works more often. That is why the situation is so dangerous. Because Mercedes does not need the entire grid to agree with them. They only need the car to be legal and fast. If it is both, then the controversy becomes fuel. It tells the team they have found something worth protecting. It tells Russell the car can carry him into bigger fights. It tells the factory that the direction is working. And it tells Red Bull that the problem may not vanish. That is what Verstappen would fear most. Not a Mercedes scandal. A Mercedes breakthrough. Because a scandal can be punished. A breakthrough must be chased. And chasing a breakthrough while the season is moving is one of the hardest things in Formula One. You can waste weeks studying the wrong trace. You can bring an upgrade that solves the wrong problem. You can change setup philosophy and weaken your own strengths. You can overreact to one circuit and damage the car somewhere else. That is how a rival performance hurts twice. First, it beats you on track. Then, it forces you to make decisions under pressure. That pressure is the hidden victory Mercedes may have gained in Austria. If Red Bull is now questioning the data, questioning the rules, questioning whether Mercedes has found something, then Mercedes has already changed the emotional balance. Because before, Red Bull was a team everyone studied. Now Mercedes is making Red Bull study them. That shift matters. At the front of Formula One, control is everything. The team in control makes calm decisions. The team chasing answers becomes vulnerable. And if Russell's Austrian car forced Red Bull into reaction mode, then the win did more than score points. It created doubt. Doubt inside the strategy meetings. Doubt inside the development plan. Doubt over whether the FIA will act. Doubt over whether the Mercedes pace is legal, illegal, or simply ahead of expectation. That is why the data is so powerful. It does not just explain the race. It changes what every team believes the race meant. The same lap time can tell two different stories. For Mercedes, it can mean the car is improving. For Red Bull, it can mean the car needs scrutiny. For the FIA, it can mean a boundary needs checking. For Verstappen, it can mean a rival has entered the danger zone. That is the essence of this first block. Mercedes may be in serious trouble, but the trouble is not only legal. It is reputational. It is political. It is technical. It is psychological. Because once a car is accused of carrying an illegal trick, the entire meaning of its performance changes. Every advantage becomes questioned. Every clean stint becomes suspicious. Every explanation becomes part of the defense. And even if the car is cleared, the pressure does not disappear immediately.